This is the recording for pages 225 through 235. We start out beginning of chapter 9 talking about Jefferson's presidency. He's a very different president than Washington and, of course, than Adams. He set a different style and tone when he has a very dressed down, for lack of a better term, simple inauguration in Washington, D.C. He eliminates the what he calls aristocratic processes or practices of the Federalist Party. He doesn't care about any of the flashy, glimmery stuff. He just wants to be a good leader, a good politician. The Republican policy was based on reentrenchment. We have lots of debt. Some suggest declaring bankruptcy, but we start paying our debt down. Our national debt goes from 83 million in 1800 to 57 million in 1809 by cutting government spending, including the military, and taxes. Jefferson replaced many Federalist Party office holders with Republicans, and the Republican Congress repealed the Judiciary Act of 1801, which Adams had slid in there at the last minute. Adams had appointed a few Supreme Court justices at the last moment, one of them being Marbury. And Marbury wants his commission. He wants to be a Supreme Court justice. So he sues Madison, who is Jefferson's Secretary of State, saying he should be able to be a Supreme Court justice, should get his commission, blah, 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 blah. He loses. They find that Adams was unconstitutional in what he did by trying to put these guys on the court at the last minute, called the midnight appointees. However, it does something way bigger. And the way bigger is the Supreme Court now, through what we call judicial review, are the ultimate interpreters of what is constitutional and what's not. That's something we talked about earlier in being one of the checks and balances, but this is now where the ultimate interpreter, it's now set in stone that the ultimate interpreter is the Supreme Court. So Napoleon has this empire in North America. And to put it very simply, Haiti, the sugar island, half of a sugar island, is supposed to be the jewel in the crown of his North American empire. But Toussaint L'Ouverture leads a slave rebellion in Haiti, and it makes Napoleon really think about whether he wants a new world possession or not. He's cash strapped. He doesn't have a lot of money, and he's fighting a war everywhere. And so when Monroe gets sent by Madison to buy just New Orleans, Congress had given him permission to buy just New Orleans so that we didn't have to worry about anybody screwing with us over New Orleans. And again, last reading was the Spanish who had New Orleans. Well, now the French have it. And Monroe gets there. He's very surprised that Napoleon is offering up all the Louisiana Territory. He gets word back to Jefferson. Jefferson says, buy it, but I need to get permission because Jefferson is a very strict believer in the Constitution and he doesn't believe he has the right to do it. So he calls an emergency session of Congress and brings in Congress and says, this is what's going to happen. We're going to double the size of the United States. 825,000 square miles. We're paying 3.5 cents an acre. $15 million. $12 million in cash, $3 million in forgotten debts, so $15 million. Man, that's a great deal. So we buy the Louisiana Territory. We send Lewis and Clark, one a military surveyor, the other presidential aide, up on an expedition from St. Louis all the way up into here. They have permission to go to see the Pacific Ocean. They are helped tremendously by Sacagawea. But there's also a second expedition that leaves St. Louis and goes south down the Mississippi onto the White River, and they end up in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And this is the Dunbar Hunter expedition. And they're supposed to come down here and explore all of this down here, but they don't. They kind of hang out in Hot Springs, say it's the most beautiful place in the world, and then go back. So that's why we don't really hear about the Dunbar Hunter expedition and why the Lewis and Clark expedition is so much more popular. Because they go and see so much. They bring back so many details about what life is going to be like in this area of land that we just now purchased. And Jefferson knows that the way of life in his brain is through farming. And now we're going to buy all this territory, which we're going to make into more farming. And more farming is going to give him more voters, and his party is going to be stronger because of it. Jefferson, however, though, fails to buy West Florida from Spain, which leads to a failed attempt to grab land from Spain in the lower Mississippi River Valley. They're thinking about creating their own nation down there. Now, I think it's interesting, this cartoon here, where Jefferson, being the prairie dog, gets stung by the hornet Napoleon into giving up $2 million just so that Napoleon, on Jefferson's behalf, will go to the Spanish and have a conversation with them so that now Jefferson can buy West Florida from Spain. So it says the prairie dog, sickened by the sting of the hornet, Napoleon, or a diplomatic puppet exhibiting his deceptions. They screwed over Jefferson. Napoleon needs money. He gets $2 million from the United States. Clear and easy. Okay. The war between France and Spain gets us involved, and the United States doesn't want to be involved. We're already being impressed. They're imprisoning our sailors, impressing them, seizing our ships, blocking us, and we're pissed off about it. And another confrontation at sea with the British. Finally, Jefferson says, forget it. Embargo Act 1807, which says we will not allow a ship to leave for a foreign port from the United States. Oh my gosh. This hurts nearly all economic groups except for manufacturers, because manufacturers in America are still going to be producing stuff. And because we can't get anything from anywhere else outside of the United States, those manufacturers are going to raise the price of American goods, and everybody's going to be hurt. Farmers in the South, people that pull raw materials out of the earth, natural resources can't be sold to the rest of the world. And we can't buy anything from the rest of the world. So not only does this harm, it proves a point to France and Great Britain, but it screws us over. The Embargo Act of 1807 is one of the most grossly over-exaggerated, we're going to prove a point to you documents. Because it hurts us more than it hurts them. End of Jefferson's presidency doesn't end well. But he runs his 2 terms. 1808, Madison runs, who's the Secretary of State, basically his handpicked successor. He runs for the presidential election and wins in 1808. But because Jefferson didn't do such a great job, the Federalists, their votes went up. They doubled in votes. Now, it's still not enough to beat James Madison, but they double in their voting power. The Non-Intercourse Act replaced the Embargo Act, which basically says, as long as you leave us alone and you respect our neutral rights, we'll trade with you. That can be France. That could be Great Britain. That could be both of them at the same time. And Madison really believes that this is going to improve Anglo-American relations. But the screaming doesn't last very long. The United States and Britain are still at odds, and we still are at odds with France too. But we have another issue to deal with, and that's the movement west, and it's dealing with Native Americans. And we see this buildup of what is known as the Pan-Indian resistance, led by Tecumseh and his brother Tenskwatawa, otherwise known as the Prophet. And at the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811, the Prophet dies. And the Indians make a big mistake again. They join the side of the British against Americans. They choose wrong again. And there's a group of senators who call for going to war with Britain right now. Let's go to war right now. John C. Calhoun, Henry Clay, Andrew Jackson. Let's go to war right now. Madison's not ready to go there yet. But you need to remember these war hawks because these guys are going to be big players in the years to come. One of them is going to be president. Madison prepares for war by increasing our army from 10,000 to 35,000 men. Still not even that many. Jefferson reduced our military. Jefferson, let's jump back, reduced our military from 50,000 to 10,000 men. Now we're up to 35,000 men, and Madison sends a message of war, or a war message, to Congress on June 1st, 1812. Now remember, who can declare war? Nobody but Congress. Even though a divided Congress doesn't unanimously vote for this, Congress passes the resolution, and the Federalist Party opposes going to war. So now the table is all set. We're going to go to war with England. If we win, Democratic Republicans come out smelling like a rose. Everything's peaches and cream. And the Federalist Party, they're going to implode on themselves. They're going to go away because they opposed a war that we win. Now, if we lose, Democratic Republicans are going to be hurt real bad. And the Federalists are going to be sitting there going, I told you so, I told you so. And they're going to be looking good. Support for the war is strongest where the economies had been damaged most by the British blockade, namely the South and the West, because they can't get their goods out to Europe. Their stuff's getting stolen. It's a mess. So we're ready to go to war. That's what we're going to talk about next time, the War of 1812, otherwise known as the Second Revolutionary War. And that's the lecture for 225 through 235.